Carlos Maza, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is one of the more disliked figures in YouTube history. For those of you who are unfamiliar with why Carlos is so disliked on this platform, in general, obviously it's not 100%, it's because the last year, just before the start of June, which is Gay Pride Month in the United States of America and maybe worldwide, honestly, don't really know, don't really care, not my issue, not a thing that I follow, Maza decided that he was going to cut together a bunch of clips out of context from Steven Crowder's videos that were debunking his show Strike Through, where Crowder was insulting Maza based on his sexuality. He put these clips together and tagged YouTube in them and essentially said that YouTube can't be a company that's pro-gay and supports gay pride when they allow people like Steven Crowder to make these jokes on this platform. Long story short, because at the time Carlos Maza launched this campaign against Steven Crowder, he was a blue checkmark that worked for Vox. He got a lot of mainstream media support, a lot of support from late night hosts, and a lot of support from online progressive media. And even though YouTube determined correctly that Steven Crowder did not violate the terms of service of the platform, they pulled his monetization anyway, and then they announced that they would be making new rule changes later on. Also, due to the pressure that Maza was putting on this campaign, and the additional mainstream media pressure, this launched what is known as the Vox adpocalypse, because a bunch of brands pulled out of YouTube because Carlos Maza was also accusing YouTube of being an anti-gay platform. Now, due to the Vox adpocalypse and the subsequent YouTube terms of service changes, a lot of creators who legitimately did not know either Carlos Maza or Steven Crowder ended up losing a lot of money, losing their monetization, and some of them outright had their channels deleted. Now look, that's the old Maza news. If you want to learn more about that in depth, I did a bunch of videos at the time this was all going on. Those will be linked in the description box below, so check them out after. But what I want to get into today is that Carlos Maza is yet another prominent socialist who has been revealed to be somebody who grew up incredibly wealthy. Now, while a lot of people thought this was funny or they thought that this was ironic, I'm going to explain to you why it's really not that surprising that a prominent online communist grew up extraordinarily wealthy. I mean, just think about it. These guys follow the ideology of Karl Marx. Karl Marx, the son of a wealthy factory owner who never had to work a day in his life. Communism and socialism is an ideology for elitists. But before we get into that, let's get into this fantastic article from John Levin over at the New York Post, where he breaks down exactly the level of wealth that we're dealing with when it comes to the Maza family. Now, the way that Levin figured out that Carlos Maza was so insanely wealthy is that his voter registration actually traced back to a $10.8 million waterfront mansion in Boca Raton, Florida. Through this mansion, Levin was able to figure out that Carlos' mother was actually someone who married the founder of the Ultimate Software Company, a company that in 2019 sold on the open market for $11.9 billion. Now, it's hard to say exactly how much money Maza's family made off the sale of this company. That's all dependent on how many shares of the company they owned before it went public, but it's not unfair to say that their net worth is somewhere around the multiple hundreds of millions, if not low billions, from the sale of this company. Maza's family has also been connected to several other properties, including a $7.1 million condo in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and a $4.4 million mansion in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. There's also luxury yachts, and basically anything that you associate with the extremely wealthy in this country, Carlos Maza likely grew up around. And by the way, I know I said that the company sold for $11.9 billion in 2019, but do not confuse that for the idea that they were broke, struggling, they developed this thing over time, and they finally sold it off. Maza's stepfather has been consistently among the highest paid CEOs in the country for the last 10 to 15 years. Maza definitely grew up with this wealth, and in fact, when contacted by Levin to comment on this piece, Maza released a statement acknowledging that he grew up with all this wealth, but trying to downplay it. My mom and her fiance are very wealthy thanks to a software company they started together when I was a kid. As a result, I've gotten to live a life of tremendous privilege. I got to go to college without debt and take low-paying internships when I graduated without worrying about rent or health insurance. I've spent my personal life trying to use that privilege to advocate for a better world. That includes advocating for economic justice, and specifically an economic system that would shift power away from the ultra-wealthy and back to the working class. I am aware that I am advocating for a system that will shift power away from members of my family. I am aware that higher taxes on the wealthy would disproportionately affect members of my family. I still think it's the right thing to do. Now, Maza goes on to explain that he has two parents, and even though his mom takes care of his rent, his healthcare, his college costs, and basically is his safety net that prevents him from ever slipping into poverty, from ever worrying about income or anything like that he also has his dad who's a teacher, and they're relatively middle class, so he sees both sides of the issues. Now, I'm not buying that nonsense. I'm sure you're not buying that nonsense. But more importantly, Carlos Maza isn't buying this. Just listen to Carlos Maza in his own words when he's talking about Tucker Carlson, who's also the child of very wealthy parents, and how he feels about Tucker Carlson's appeals to populism.
Tucker Carlson likes to brand himself as a real man of the people.
Politicians, big business, the media, they are all on the same side.
Taking on the liberal elite.
Now Democrats have become the party of the elite professional class.
And standing up for everyday Americans.
It's not a left-right thing, it's a ruling class versus everybody else thing.
One problem with Tucker's man of the people shtick.
You're about the most unordinary person I know. You're an elitist. You're an
No. But see, I'm an out of the closet elitist. I don't run around pretending to be a man of the people. I'm absolutely not a man of the people at all.
Yeah. Tucker's full name is Tucker Swanson McNear Carlson. His stepmom is the heiress to the Swanson frozen food empire. He went to an elite boarding school in Rhode Island, got famous for wearing bow ties on national television, and has spent his professional career bouncing between cushy cable news jobs. By all measures, Tucker Carlson is a member of the American elite.
How do you pay your bills?
Well, I'm, extraordinarily loaded just from, money I, inherited.
You're a trust fund baby, are you not?
No, completely. I've never needed to work. I mean, it's all just the whole cable news thing. It was like a phase I was going through.
So what is going on here? Why would a guy who bragged about being an out-of-the-closet elitist host a show where he rails against the ruling class?
Now, this is why I wanted to make this video, because if you set the Steven Crowder thing aside for a second and you look at Maza's overall body of work, the person that he most consistently targeted was Tucker Carlson. If you look at his strike-through episodes, he went after him the most viciously. In fact, Carlos Maza's old Twitter bio actually defamed Tucker Carlson as a white supremacist. And I can't help but see that the reason why he went after him so hard is because Tucker grew up exactly how Carlos Maza grew up. A wealthy kid that didn't really have to work for a living that found himself into politics. However, unlike Maza, Tucker Carlson told the truth about how he grew up. He said publicly multiple times that he never really had to work a day in his life. Unlike Maza, Tucker never pretended to be something that he's not. He never hid how he grew up. He never pled poverty. Those are clips of Tucker Carlson acknowledging how he grew up in his own words. He didn't need a journalist to go dig it up and prove it out because this wasn't something he was ashamed of. This wasn't something that he was hiding. And in that way, Tucker was more honest than Carlos Maza has ever been with his audience. Look, I've lived in New York City since I was 7 years old, and I'm going to clue you in on a little bit of a secret that I learned going to college in this city. I've met dozens of people that are just like Carlos Maza. Wealthy kids that have parents that take care of all of their worries and expenses. They pay their rent, they get them dope apartments, everything that they could possibly want. And 9 times out of 10, those are the people that become hardcore communists. And even though they're preaching and pushing an inherently violent and authoritarian ideology, they're not doing so because they were born evil or they just decided to turn evil randomly one day. They're doing it out of guilt. Their entire lives, they've had everything covered by their parents, a near omnipotent force that has been able to make problems go away and give them everything that they could possibly want. So they believe that the government should act in the same way that their parents do. And when they see people struggling, they think, my parents took care of that, someone should take care of them, instead of realizing that their parents just made better decisions than a lot of other people's parents did. I grew up in a single-parent household and we struggled a lot, but one of my most proudest moments was in December of 2018 when my mom's car broke down and I was able to help her with the down payment on a brand new car. My entire childhood, my mom was backed into buying crappy used car after crappy used car when something happened to the previous one, and it felt really good for me to be able to give her that bit of relief and have her get something nice for a change. But the reason I was so happy to do that, and I don't think it's some random other person's responsibility, is because when you grow up with a little bit of struggle in your life, you think of ways, or at least you should think of ways, that you can make it better. When you grow up in the context of someone else always taking care of your needs and everything that you want, It's not unusual for you to develop a political ideology or support a political ideology that says that someone else should take care of the needs and a lot of the things that people want. And as much as the context that Maza grew up in skews his political beliefs, I'm sure that's true of me. I grew up seeing a struggle, so I always thought, how can I alleviate that struggle? And that's the difference. It's they should do something versus I should do something. So while I acknowledge that Carlos Maza did a really terrible thing that hurt a lot of people not connected to the situation, while I acknowledge that he supports an inherently violent and authoritarian ideology, I think it's important to point out that a lot of the Champagne socialists like Carlos Maza are not inherently bad people. They're just reflections of the context that they grew up in. But those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, support me with the support links, follow me on the social medias. You know the drill. This was a video related to Carlos Maza. His family has a lot of money, blah, 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 blah. Bye. Till next time.